Restorers enlarged this woman's gaze and found something that shouldn't be there. The restoration laboratory at the National Museum of African American History was silent except for the constant hum of the ventilation system. Dr. Maya Collins adjusted the digital microscope settings as she examined the photograph from the Harper collection. The 1851 daguerreotype showed a seemingly ordinary scene for the time. The Harper family, owners of a prosperous cotton plantation in Georgia, posing formally on their veranda. Mr. and Mrs. Harper, seated, their 3 daughters in crisp white dresses arranged in front of them, and the plantation's overseer standing stiffly to one side. Behind them, almost blending into the shadows, stood a young enslaved woman holding a fan. Unlike the Harpers with their practiced poses and solemn expressions, the woman's face seemed slightly blurred, as though she had moved during the exposure. For decades, curators had overlooked her, focusing instead on the Harper family's historical significance as early industrial cotton producers. "Almost done with the Harper collection?" asked Dr. Marcus Webb as he entered the lab, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Just finishing the digital preservation," Maya replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "But there's something odd about this one." She gestured to the screen where the high-resolution scan displayed the enhanced image. Marcus leaned closer, studying the photograph. "What caught your attention?" "Her," Maya said, using the cursor to indicate the enslaved woman. "The catalog simply labels her as unnamed domestics, but look at her eyes." She zoomed in, the sophisticated software bringing the woman's face into sharper focus than had ever been possible before. Where the other figures stared blankly at the camera, as was customary for long exposure photographs of the era, the enslaved woman's eyes held something different, an intensity, a presence that seemed to reach across the centuries. "I don't think her blur is from movement during exposure," Maya continued. "I think they deliberately tried to obscure her, and now I want to know why." Maya adjusted the enhancement parameters, pushing the technology to its limits. As the woman's eyes clarified on screen, both researchers fell silent. In the reflection of her dark pupils, barely discernible, but unmistakably there, was something that shouldn't exist in an 1851 photograph, what appeared to be flames. The next morning, Maya met with Dr. Eleanor Brooke, the museum's head curator and foremost expert on antebellum photographic techniques. "Reflections in eyes are common in modern photography," Eleanor explained, studying the enhanced image on Maya's tablet. "But in 1851, exposure times were too long, and resolution too poor to capture something like this. It should be impossible. Yet there it is," Maya insisted. "And there's more." She swiped to another enhanced section of the image. "I've identified her. The museum catalog lists her as unnamed, but look at this." She pointed to a tiny object around the woman's neck, previously invisible to the naked eye, but now clearly discernible, a pendant with initials engraved on it. "LJ," Maya said. "I cross-referenced with the Harper plantation records in our archives. Her name was Lucinda Jackson, 22 years old when this photograph was taken." Eleanor looked impressed. "What else did the records say about her?" "Almost nothing. Just a line item in a property inventory," Maya replied, her frustration evident. "But the Harper family correspondence mentions a fire at the plantation 3 months after this photograph was taken. A significant portion of the estate was destroyed." "And you think what we're seeing in her eyes is a reflection of that fire?" Eleanor asked skeptically. "That's impossible. This photograph predates the fire by months." "I know it doesn't make sense," Maya admitted. "But what if she knew something was going to happen? What if she was involved?" Eleanor studied the image again, her academic skepticism warring with the evidence before her eyes. "We need more information about Lucinda Jackson, and about what really happened at Harper Plantation in the summer of 1851. "There's one more thing," Maya said hesitantly. "The Harper collection was donated by Margaret Harper Davis in 1982. She's the last direct descendant of the family, still alive and living in Atlanta. She's 91 now." Eleanor considered this. Contact her. Perhaps family stories passed down might shed some light on what we're seeing. Sometimes oral histories preserve what official records erase. As Maya left Eleanor's office, she pulled up the enhanced image of Lucinda's eyes on her tablet once more. The tiny reflection of flames seemed to flicker with a life of their own, as if Lucinda Jackson was still trying to tell her story, still waiting for someone to see what had been hidden in plain sight for over 170 years. The Harper estate in Atlanta's historic Buckhead district was an imposing Greek revival mansion set behind wrought iron gates. As Maya walked up the circular driveway, she couldn't help but think about the wealth that had built this house, wealth created by the forced labor of people like Lucinda Jackson. Margaret Harper Davis received her in a sun-filled conservatory, a small, frail woman with alert blue eyes that assessed Maya sharply from her wheelchair. "I'm intrigued by your call, Dr. Collins," Mrs. Davis said as a caretaker served tea. "The Harper collection has been at the museum for 40 years. Why the sudden interest in one particular photograph?" Maya chose her words carefully. "We've been digitizing the collection using new technology that reveals details previously invisible. I'm particularly interested in an enslaved woman named Lucinda Jackson, who appears in an 1851 family portrait." Something flickered across Mrs. Davis's face. Recognition, perhaps concern. "Lucinda," she repeated softly. "My grandmother spoke of her, a troublesome woman by all accounts. Troublesome? Maya asked, keeping her voice neutral. That's how family stories described her. Too educated for her own good. Someone had taught her to read, which was illegal then, of course. Mrs. Davis sipped her tea. Why your interest in her specifically? Maya produced her tablet and showed the enhanced photograph. We found something unusual. In the reflection in her eyes, it appears to be flames. Yet this photograph was taken 3 months before the documented fire at Harper Plantation. Mrs. Davis's teacup clattered against its saucer. Her caretaker moved quickly to steady her hand, but the elderly woman waved her away. Family history is more complicated than museum catalogs suggest, Dr. Collins, she said finally. The official record states there was one fire at Harper Plantation in August 1851. The truth is, there were 2 fires. She reached for a small bell and rang it. The caretaker appeared with a carved wooden box, which Mrs. Davis opened with shaking hands. Inside was a leather-bound journal. My grandmother's diary, she explained. Charlotte Harper was 14 when the photograph was taken. She kept this hidden her entire life. Maya accepted the journal reverently, opening to a page Mrs. Davis indicated. April 7th, 1851, Maya read aloud. Father had the photographer come today for a family portrait. Lucinda was forced to stand with us, though she has been punished just yesterday. Her eyes frighten me. She looks at us as though she can see something we cannot. Maya turned the page, continuing. April 9th, 1851. There was a fire in the night. Father says it started in the kitchen, but I heard him tell Mother it was deliberately set. Lucinda has disappeared. Father's in a rage. He says she will be made an example of when found. The first fire was small, Mrs. Davis explained. Deliberately set as a distraction so Lucinda could escape. She was never captured. And the second fire? Maya asked. Mrs. Davis's voice grew quieter. That came 3 months later, much larger. Destroyed the main house and the processing barn. The family always believed Lucinda returned to finish what she started. Back at the museum, Maya and Marcus pored over the Harper family records with new purpose. Charlotte Harper's diary, which Mrs. Davis had donated to the museum, provided context previously missing from the official narrative. Listen to this entry, Maya said, carefully turning a brittle page. July 29th, 1851. Father has received a warning. A letter delivered by a freedman from Savannah. It said only, Justice returns on the summer wind. He has doubled the overseers and locked away all the lanterns at night. Mother pretends not to be afraid, but I see her watching the tree line at dusk. And then the second fire happened on August 2nd, Marcus noted, consulting the timeline they had constructed. Exactly when the quarterly cotton shipment was being prepared. But what about the reflection in Lucinda's eyes? Eleanor asked, joining their research session. Even with this new information, it doesn't explain what we're seeing. The photograph was taken before either fire. Maya had been contemplating this. I have a theory. The daguerreotype process was complicated. After exposure, the image had to be developed using mercury vapor, then fixed. What if the plate was exposed again during this process? Perhaps accidentally, or deliberately. A double exposure? Marcus considered this, but that would mean someone wanted to superimpose flames into the portrait. Who would do that, and why? Maya turned to another entry in Charlotte's diary. April 15th, 1851. Mr. Gillespie, the photographer, has been arrested. Father says he was part of the plot, that he helped Lucinda escape. They found abolitionist pamphlets in his boarding house room. The photographer, Eleanor whispered. He must have doctored the image somehow during processing, created a message hidden in plain sight. A message or a warning, Maya agreed. Look at the composition of the photograph again. Lucinda is positioned directly behind Mr. Harper, almost like a shadow or a conscience, and her eyes, containing fire, are staring directly at the viewer. It's as if she's saying, see what's coming. They worked late into the evening, examining every aspect of the photograph and cross-referencing with historical records. The Harper Plantation fire of August 1851 had been documented as an accident, but Charlotte's diary suggested a coordinated act of resistance. As Maya was preparing to leave, Eleanor called from her office. You need to see this, she said urgently. She had found a newspaper article from the Savannah Republican dated August 5th, 1851. Destructive fire at Harper Plantation coincides with similar incidents at 3 neighboring estates. Authorities suspect coordinated arson. Vigilance committees forming to apprehend suspected insurrectionists. It wasn't just one plantation, Maya realized. It was an organized resistance. And somehow, Eleanor added, Lucinda Jackson and a sympathetic photographer left evidence hidden in an image that everyone would see but no one would notice, until now. The Georgia Historical Society in Savannah housed records that hadn't been digitized or transferred to the National Museum. Maya spent 2 days in their archives, searching for any mention of Lucinda Jackson or the photographer Samuel Gillespie. In a collection of legal proceedings, she found what she was looking for, Gillespie's arrest record and testimony. The photographer had denied any involvement in helping Lucinda escape or in the plantation fires. He was eventually released due to insufficient evidence, but was ruined professionally by the accusation of being an abolitionist sympathizer. More intriguingly, Maya discovered a collection of letters from an underground abolitionist network operating in coastal Georgia. One letter, dated March 1851, mentioned a plan to help an enslaved woman described as exceptionally literate and determined escape from the Harper situation. The letter was signed simply G. Could Gillespie have been part of this network? Had he deliberately created a photograph with a hidden message, a warning encoded in Lucinda's gaze? Maya's research was interrupted by a call from Marcus. "You need to come back to Washington immediately," he said, his voice tense with excitement. "We found Lucinda Jackson." 24 hours later, Maya stood in the museum's research room, staring at documents Marcus had discovered in a recently acquired collection from a black church in Philadelphia. The First African Presbyterian Church kept detailed records of formerly enslaved people who came north, Marcus explained. "Look at this entry from September 1851. The yellowed page listed new arrivals assisted by the church. Among them, Lucinda Jackson, age 22, formerly enslaved by Harper family of Georgia, assisted with lodging and employment as seamstress with Henderson family. She made it to Philadelphia," Maya whispered. "She escaped." "And there's more," Marcus continued, turning the page. "She gave testimony about her escape and the resistance network that helped her. The church recorded it as part of their abolitionist activities. Lucinda's testimony described her literacy, taught secretly by Mrs. Harper's sister, who had northern sympathies. She recounted how she had used this forbidden knowledge to pass messages between enslaved people on neighboring plantations, coordinating a resistance effort that culminated in the August fires, acts of economic sabotage designed to strike at the heart of the plantation system. Most remarkably, she mentioned the photographer. Mr. Gillespie told me to look directly at him, to hold my gaze steady even though it was forbidden. He said, 'Let history see you.' When the family wasn't looking, he showed me the glass plate, pointed to my eyes, and whispered that he had captured my fire, that someday someone would see." Maya felt a chill. The photographer had deliberately created this anomaly, this impossible reflection, as a form of documentation and resistance, a message sent into the future. "What happened to her after Philadelphia?" Maya asked. Marcus smiled. "That's the best part. She married a freedman named Henry Williams in 1853. They had 4 children. I've traced her descendants to the present day. Maya, her great-great-great-granddaughter, is a history professor at Howard University. Her name is Dr. Josephine Williams. Dr. Josephine Williams' office at Howard University was lined with books and historical photographs. A specialist in 19th century resistance movements, she listened intently as Maya explained her discovery. My family has always maintained oral histories about an ancestor who escaped slavery," Josephine confirmed, "but we had no documentation, no proof beyond family stories. The name Lucinda was passed down, but we didn't know her full name or where she had been enslaved." Maya opened her laptop and showed Josephine the enhanced photograph. "This is your great-great-great-grandmother," she said softly. Josephine's hand trembled slightly as she touched the screen, tracing the outline of Lucinda's face. "She looks like my aunt," she whispered. Together they examined the enhanced image of Lucinda's eyes with the impossible reflection of flames. Maya explained their theory about the photographer's deliberate manipulation. "It's extraordinary," Josephine said, "a form of resistance through documentation. Gillespie couldn't openly oppose slavery in that environment, so he created this subtle act of defiance, preserving evidence of what was coming. And your great-great-great-grandmother was central to this resistance network," Maya added. "The fires at multiple plantations were coordinated acts of economic sabotage." Josephine nodded. "Family stories mentioned that Lucinda had organized other enslaved people, that she used her literacy to coordinate resistance. But we never knew the details." She paused, considering. "History tends to focus on dramatic escapes or violent uprisings, but resistance took many forms. Economic sabotage was a powerful tool. These fires would have disrupted production, damaged stored cotton, and created financial losses that struck at the heart of the plantation economy. The Harper family never recovered financially," Maya confirmed. "Their subsequent cotton shipments fell dramatically. By 1860, they had sold half their land." A successful operation, then," Josephine said with quiet satisfaction. As they continued sharing information, piecing together Lucinda's story from both official records and family histories, a more complete picture emerged, one of strategic resistance, coordination across plantations, and the crucial role of allies like the photographer. "We need to update the exhibition," Maya said. "The Harper collection has been presented as a record of plantation owners, but it's actually evidence of resistance, hidden in plain sight for over 170 years. "Lucinda would appreciate that," Josephine replied. "According to family stories," she always said, "truth hides in the details. You just need to look closely enough to see it." The museum's conservation lab became a hive of activity as Maya's team examined all the photographs in the Harper collection with their enhanced technologies. They discovered that the photograph of Lucinda wasn't the only one containing hidden messages. In another image, showing the plantation's cotton processing barn, they found tiny markings scratched into the silver plate, a crude map of escape routes and safe houses. In a portrait of Mr. Harper, they discovered almost invisible alterations to his eyes, giving him a slightly demonic appearance detectable only under magnification. Gillespie was waging a subtle war through his photography, Marcus observed as they catalogued each discovery. Creating an official record for the Harper family, while simultaneously embedding subversive messages. Meanwhile, Eleanor was coordinating with Dr. Williams to organize an exhibition titled Hidden in Plain Sight, Visual Resistance in Plantation Photography. The centerpiece would be the enhanced image of Lucinda Jackson, her eyes with their impossible reflection of flames staring back at visitors across time. As the exhibition took shape, Maya received an unexpected call from Margaret Harper Davis. "I've been thinking about our conversation," the elderly woman said, her voice frail but determined. "There are additional family papers I didn't show you, documents my grandmother kept separate from what was donated to the museum." 2 days later, Maya sat in Mrs. Davis's library, carefully examining a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon. They were correspondence between Charlotte Harper and her aunt in Boston, the same woman who had secretly taught Lucinda to read. "My grandmother was torn," Mrs. Davis explained. "Raised in a slave-owning family, but influenced by her northern aunt's abolitionist views. After the fires, after Lucinda escaped, Charlotte began questioning everything she had been taught. The letters revealed a young woman's evolving moral awakening. In one particularly poignant letter dated 1853, Charlotte wrote, 'I sometimes think of Lucinda and wonder if she found the freedom she sought. Father still rages about her betrayal, but I cannot help thinking that the true betrayal was ours against her humanity.' Why are you sharing these now?" Maya asked gently. Mrs. Davis was silent for a moment. "Family legacy is a complex thing, Dr. Collins. For generations, the Harpers have maintained a narrative of genteel plantation life disrupted by outside forces, but that narrative was built on a foundation of convenient omissions. As the last Harper, perhaps it's my responsibility to finally tell the complete story." She gestured to the letters. "Take these. Include them in your exhibition. Let people see not just the resistance of the enslaved, but also the moral conflicts within the enslaver class, the small cracks in the system that sometimes allowed for human connection across its divisions." As Maya carefully packed the fragile letters, Mrs. Davis added, "I've often wondered about Lucinda's descendants. What became of them over the generations?" "Would you like to meet one of them?" Maya asked. "Dr. Josephine Williams, Lucinda's great-great-great-granddaughter, is working with us on the exhibition." For the first time since they'd met, Mrs. Davis looked genuinely shaken. I don't know if I have the right, or the courage. History isn't just about the past," Maya said softly. "Sometimes it's about what we choose to do with it now." The conservation lab's lights were dimmed as Dr. Eleanor Brooke carefully positioned the original daguerreotype of Lucinda Jackson under a specialized microscope connected to a spectral imaging system. This technology could detect substances present on the photographic plate that were invisible to conventional methods. "If Gillespie manipulated this image deliberately," she explained to Maya and Marcus, "there might be physical evidence on the plate itself. Daguerreotypes are silver-plated copper sheets polished to a mirror finish. Any alteration would leave microscopic traces." The team watched in silence as Eleanor methodically scanned the plate, focusing particularly on the area around Lucinda's eyes. After nearly an hour, she straightened with an expression of triumph. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the monitor displaying a false color image of the scan results. "There are traces of a specific chemical compound around the eye area, potassium ferrocyanide. It wasn't typically used in daguerreotype processing." "What would it do?" Maya asked. "It could create the appearance of light or fire when applied carefully to specific areas of the plate during development," Eleanor explained. "It's definitive proof that Gillespie deliberately manipulated this image. This wasn't an accident or a double exposure. It was intentional artistic and political sabotage." Meanwhile, Dr. Williams had been conducting her own investigation, tracking Samuel Gillespie's movements after his professional disgrace in Georgia. She discovered that he had eventually relocated to Boston, where he continued as a photographer, but also became openly involved with abolitionist causes. In an 1857 abolitionist newspaper, she found a small article about an exhibition of Gillespie's work titled Unseen America, which purportedly showed the true face of the South's peculiar institution. The exhibition had caused controversy, but was championed by prominent abolitionists. He continued his resistance through photography, Dr. Williams reported during their research meeting. Once he was in the North, he could be more explicit about his views, but he had begun his activism years earlier when it was far more dangerous. With each discovery, the story grew more complete. Gillespie had been part of an underground network that helped Lucinda escape. He had used his professional skills to create subtle acts of resistance, embedding messages and symbols in photographs commissioned by the very people whose system he opposed. But the most remarkable discovery came from an unexpected source. Margaret Harper Davis contacted Maya again, this time with information she had found in a hidden compartment of an antique desk. A single letter from Samuel Gillespie to Charlotte Harper, dated 1855. "I know you have questions about what happened," the photographer had written. "Know that she is safe and flourishing in her new life. The fire in her eyes that day was real, not just my artistic manipulation, but the genuine flame of a spirit that refused to be extinguished. Remember what you saw, Charlotte. Remember and question what you've been taught." Charlotte had kept this letter hidden her entire life, a secret connection to a moment when her understanding of her world began to fracture. 3 months later, the exhibition, Hidden in Plain Sight, Visual Resistance in Plantation Photography, opened at the National Museum of African American History. At its center stood an interactive display showing the original daguerreotype of the Harper family alongside the enhanced digital version revealing the flames in Lucinda's eyes. Visitors could use a touchscreen to zoom in on different areas of the photograph, discovering the various ways the photographer had embedded subtle messages of resistance. An entire section was dedicated to the technical analysis, proving deliberate manipulation of the image, alongside historical context about photography as a tool of both documentation and subversion. The exhibition extended beyond the Harper photograph to explore other examples of visual resistance throughout history, ways that oppressed people had used images to communicate, document, and resist when direct opposition was too dangerous. On opening night, the museum hosted a panel discussion featuring Maya, Dr. Williams, and, to everyone's surprise, Margaret Harper Davis, who had agreed to participate despite her frailty. The auditorium was packed with scholars, students, and members of the public. What we've discovered challenges our understanding of resistance during slavery, Maya explained to the audience. We often think of resistance as dramatic acts, escapes, rebellions, but here we see something more subtle yet equally powerful, a conspiracy of documentation, a photographer and an enslaved woman collaborating to create evidence that would speak long after they were gone. Dr. Williams spoke about the importance of reclaiming Lucinda's full humanity and agency. My ancestor wasn't just escaping for herself. She was part of an organized resistance network, using her forbidden literacy to coordinate economic sabotage across multiple plantations. The fires were strategic attacks on the foundation of the plantation economy. When it was Mrs. Davis's turn to speak, a hush fell over the auditorium. At 91, she needed assistance to stand at the podium, but her voice was clear and determined. The Harper family name is on buildings and streets throughout Georgia, she began. Our history has been sanitized, our wealth rarely questioned. For generations, we maintained a carefully curated narrative about our past. That narrative was false. She paused, looking directly at Dr. Williams. I can't undo what my ancestors did, but I can acknowledge the truth they tried to hide. Lucinda Jackson was not property. She was a woman of extraordinary courage and intelligence who fought for her freedom in ways my family never wanted remembered. As she returned to her seat, Mrs. Davis did something unexpected. She reached out and took Dr. Williams' hand. Two women connected across time through a daguerreotype and the hidden message in a pair of defiant eyes. After the panel, visitors lined up to view the exhibition. Many stood transfixed before the enlarged image of Lucinda's eyes with their impossible flames, a message sent across time, finally received and understood. She knew exactly what she was doing when she looked into that camera, Dr. Williams commented to Maya as they watched the public's reaction. She was testifying to her own resistance, creating evidence that couldn't be erased. And now her testimony is finally being heard, Maya replied. 1 year later, Maya stood in the conservation lab, carefully examining a new acquisition, a small leather-bound journal recently discovered in the attic of a Philadelphia home being renovated. The journal had been authenticated as belonging to Lucinda Jackson Williams, written between 1853 and 1875 after her escape to freedom. Listen to this entry, Maya said to Dr. Williams, who had become both a colleague and friend during their work together. April 7th, 1856. 5 years since the photograph. I dream sometimes of that moment, standing behind them, looking into Mr. Gillespie's lens. I knew what we had planned. I knew what was coming. He told me to put my thoughts of fire into my eyes, to let my gaze speak what my voice could not. Today I received word that the photograph still exists in their house, that Charlotte looks at it often. I wonder if she sees what I was trying to tell her. She knew, Dr. Williams whispered. She was consciously creating a record. The journal provided the final confirmation of their theory. Lucinda and Gillespie had deliberately collaborated to create a visual testimony of resistance, embedding it within an image commissioned by this very family that had enslaved her. The journal also documented Lucinda's life in freedom, her marriage, her children, her work with the Underground Railroad, her eventual role as a teacher in Philadelphia's first school for black children. It told the story not just of her escape, but of her continued activism and commitment to liberation for others. Maya and Dr. Williams had spent the past year expanding their research into a book titled The Fire in Her Eyes: Photography, Resistance, and Memory in American Slavery. The book had brought new attention to the ways enslaved people had resisted through documentation and testimony, often using the very technologies and systems meant to control them. Margaret Harper Davis had died peacefully 3 months earlier, but not before establishing the Lucinda Jackson Truth and Reconciliation Fund, a foundation dedicated to researching and preserving stories of resistance and supporting education about the realities of slavery and its aftermath. As part of this work, the Harper Mansion in Atlanta had been transformed into a research center and museum. The room where Maya had first interviewed Mrs. Davis now housed an exhibition on economic resistance to slavery, with the story of the coordinated plantation fires as its centerpiece. In the National Museum, Lucinda's photograph had become one of the most visited exhibits. Schools brought students to see it, to learn how a woman had stared into a camera in 1851 with flames in her eyes, flames that represented both what was to come and the unquenchable fire of resistance that burned within her. History isn't just what happened, Maya often told visitors during her gallery talks. It's what was documented, what was preserved, what was seen and recognized. For too long, we've looked at these plantation photographs and seen only the enslavers, treating the enslaved as background elements. But when we look more closely, when we literally magnify their presence, we see a different story emerging. And in the center of the exhibition, Lucinda Jackson's eyes continue to blaze across time, no longer overlooked, no longer in the shadows, but finally seen and understood in all their defiant, deliberate fire. Each visitor who stood before her gaze became part of the audience she and Gillespie had imagined when they collaborated on their act of visual resistance. The message hidden in her eyes had finally been delivered. 170 years after she had sent it into the future. I was here. I resisted. I had agency, and now at last you see me,